we're going to be using the focus in handler to check whether this has gained focus. We could use the click event handler, but this isn't going to accommodate for users that have tabbed down to this field, so we need to make sure that we use the focus in handler. What we then need to do is create a blur handler for when the user leaves this field, so either when they click out or when they tab out to something else. And then we'll go ahead and create the actual validation process with the PHP file I mentioned earlier. So we've given this email field an ID of email. So inside ajax.js, this is how we can reference it. So we're going to go ahead and create an event handler for this, and we need to we need to use the hash selector because we've used an ID here, and we are writing email. Now what we're going to do is create the focus in handler, and we're going to create a function inside of that. So focus in inside is a function, as you would normally lay out: function, parentheses, and curly parentheses. We're then going to come down, and inside here is going to be everything we write when we focus in. Now we're going to be doing something slightly different in this tutorial, which you wouldn't have seen throughout the rest of this tutorial series, at least not with event handlers, and that is appending on event handlers to the end. So in a minute we're going to create a blur event handler onto the end of this, and what happens here is it just saves us having to reference down. So instead of coming down here and typing blur and then coming down here and typing key up, we can actually append or bind different handlers onto the end of this main selector here. So that's just something useful to know. With regards to focus in, what do we want to happen? Well, we want to create a span over here, which is just going to hold some information about our selection or what we've typed inside this email field, and I'm just going to call this email feedback. So inside of here we need to again select email underscore feedback, and we then need to apply some text to this, so we're going to use the text function here. Inside of here I'm just going to write go on, enter a valid email address. So now what's going to happen is when we focus in on this email field, the email feedback span will fill up with this text here. So let's go ahead and test that. I'm going to click on that, and you can see that's filled up. When I click away, it obviously doesn't disappear because we haven't created this yet. So let me go ahead and tab down to this from my URL bar here, and you can see that this produces more or less the exactly the same effect. I'm just going to tab down, and you can see that this is now active, and that has worked. And this is in addition to, as opposed to using the click. We would use the same effect or have the same effect when we click in here. However, if we were to tab down to it, you can see that this is now in focus and we don't have our text. So this is why we used the focus in event handler. Okay, so the next handler we want to create is blur. And when a user leaves this field, either tabbing out or clicking elsewhere on the page, we want to run another function. So let's bring this down again, and this time we want to do exactly the same as we did here, but we actually want to create nothing. So we want to remove the feedback. So email feedback dot text, and inside of there, nothing. So now what's going to happen is when we click in and click out, that will disappear. Also, when we tab down to it and then tab away from it, it disappears as well. So now that we have these two aren't quite complete yet, for the simple reason that, for example, if I was to type something in here and leave and come back, you can see that it now, so it now disappears like this. Now this is absolutely fine. However, if we were to go and click into this, we actually need to be able to validate it as well. So if I was to click in, let's just say there was nothing in here. If I was to click in, it says go on and enter a valid email address. I can click away, that's fine. If I was to then go ahead and enter a valid email address and click away, that disappears, that's fine. We might have come down to another field down here. But when I click back in, because I'm using the focus in, we're automatically generating this this message here. So we want to always tell the user that the email address is valid if there is something in here. So we need to create a quick check here to determine what we want to do. So I'm going to say if, and I'm going to use a selector to select the value of our email field. So val here. If that equals nothing, then we can ask the user to enter something. So now let's test that out. Let me just go back to the code and I'll quickly explain. We use this selector here to select the value inside of this input field. We then grab the value of the field, so this would equal, say, Alex if I was to have entered Alex in here. Now if that equals nothing, so if it's empty, then we can ask the user to enter a valid email address. Now if they haven't, if it's not empty, sorry, we can do something else.